Hi, I'm Ashley, and today we're going to practice negative painting. So this gives us a lot of work on working with different amounts of water and kind of varying our values and the intensity of our colors. And it helps us practice painting around shapes and preserving light areas. So it's a really good exercise to practice our water control and our hand control, but also it's just really fun to do. So today I'm doing pumpkins.
And I just drew a little pumpkin and cut it out, and that's what I'm going to use as a stencil so that my shapes are nice and easy to draw. So to start with, I'm just going to use a really large brush and not wet up, but do a light wash of yellow over the whole page. And that's just going to get that first light color in. And it's going to be super faint. And this is all going to be like warm oranges and yellows, just like fall tones, basically. And this painting's nice because it gives you a lot of practice on doing washes of color. So you can learn about your like pigment to water ratio and making nice even washes, but it also doesn't matter that much if it's perfect. It'll turn out looking cool anyway. So now we're gonna let this layer dry and then we'll do our first shapes. I'm gonna use a heat tool to dry it. All right, so the next step after getting that first wash in and dried is to draw a few pumpkins. So we don't wanna do too many on this first layer because we're gonna be filling in more as we go. So I'm just gonna put in a couple. And I'm just tracing out this silhouette. So I drew this pumpkin on some scratch watercolor paper that I had that I was working out some like color combos and some brush strokes. And then it was scrap paper. So I just used it and cut it, and it's nice and thick. So it's easy to draw around, which is nice. It's not like thin paper that folds when you're trying to trace it. Anyway, so really helpful. Okay, so I'm going to start with just two for this first layer, and I am going to lighten this up a little bit, so I have to go grab my kneaded eraser because I don't have it. All right, so I should probably get another kneaded eraser because this one is my only one, and I take it with me in my purse, which I always have sketching stuff in, and then I don't ever have it at the painting table. Anyway, so I'm just rolling this over my shapes just to lighten them up so that the pencil line doesn't show as much. I'll draw the next ones lighter so that I don't have to work as hard to erase the pencil lines. Anyway, okay, good enough. Now I'm gonna take a slightly darker color. So I'm using, I don't even know what yellow this is actually. It's a little bit more opaque and it's a warm yellow. And so I'm just gonna take a little bit of this cooler yellow and the warmer yellow and mix them, but it's got less water in it than the initial wash. So that will make it darker. And then we're gonna paint around these pumpkins, and we're gonna paint everything except for the pumpkins here. So I'm just going to be careful around the silhouettes here. And this brush, it's really big, but it does come to a nice point, so I can kind of get into those little bumps pretty easily with it. And feel free to turn the page, turn the paper around to make the angle easier to paint around these shapes. And this is a, like I said, a nice exercise to work on these like flat washes and working quickly so that the background stays wet and all dries at a similar rate. But you can also have a little bit of fun with it and do some wet and wet as well. So I think I'll do that on this layer after I get this all painted around. I'm gonna drop in a little bit of, I don't know what color yet, we'll see. But let me just get this painted first. Okay. So now that's all painted, but up here it's starting to dry, so I'm just gonna add a little bit more water and pigment up there. And then I'm gonna drop in a little bit of yellow ochre, just in some different areas to get a little bit of variety in this wash. Okay, you can also kind of splatter in if you want, and that'll get a different texture. Okay. And then I got some splatters on the light pumpkins here, so I'm just gonna dab them up. Okay. And then again, we just need to let that dry or use a heat tool to dry it. All right, so now that that's dry, we can do another round of pumpkins. And I'm gonna do these ones not touching, but as we get farther in the painting, we'll put some like in between to look like they're tucked in behind the painting. I'm gonna try to keep my pencil lines just a little bit lighter here. Okay. I think this time I'm gonna do 3 of them, and I'm just kind of varying the angle here. I guess I could put some upside down, but I think I'm gonna keep them all right side up. Okay. And then I'm gonna put one kind of up here in the top, going off the page a little bit. Okay, here we go. Okay, so now we're just gonna take a darker mixture, and you can start introducing other colors if you want. So I'm gonna take just a little bit of a red to make it more orange for this next layer. Just make sure I have enough mixed up here. Okay, so same thing. So now we're gonna paint everything in the background. So we're gonna paint around our original shapes and around the new shapes. Okay, I have a lot of paint and water on my brush, so I'm gonna start in this bigger area. And then now that some of it's run out, I'm gonna go into this small area. Okay. So now I'm going to dry that layer and then we'll do it again. All right, so for this layer, I'm going to start overlapping a little bit. So I'm going to throw one kind of in the middle, and I'm just not going to draw onto the shapes that are already on the page. So anytime that I hit one of those shapes, I'm just going to stop and leave it like that. So it's like this pumpkin is tucked in behind. I'm going to throw another one down here. And now I'm going to switch to a smaller brush. So I was using a 22 round, which is like a monster. And now I'm going to switch to this 16 round. Now, these are Ducato artist brushes. I got them on Amazon. They're not very expensive. And I found that the brush sizes aren't standardized. So just know that it might not look exactly the same size as a different brand size 16 or whatever. But that's the size that this one is. Now I'm mixing up a darker wash, so I'm adding more red, and so it's going to be a nice dark orange color. But I'm also using less water, so it's a lot darker for both of those reasons. I'm adding more red and I'm using less water. You still need enough water to make it move well, though. Okay, and then again, just painting around the shapes. So you can do any shapes with this. It doesn't have to be pumpkins. I just chose pumpkins because, I don't know, I thought it'd be fun. And it's an interesting shape, but you could do something like hearts or circles or stars or whatever you want. It doesn't really matter. The concept is the same. A lot of people do leaves. Also, that's a really common negative painting option. So each time that you add another layer, you're going to have less that you're painting because you're painting around all of the shapes, but it's going to be a darker, thicker mixture. Right, another layer down, and you'll notice that as you keep going, because you're not able to just paint the whole page kind of in one go, you're going around shapes, makes you go a little bit slower. It's a little bit harder to get a consistent wash where everything's evenly wet. So, I mean, it's still pretty decent, but you'll see there's a hard edge here where this dried, and then I kind of laid this on top. And that's okay. That's kind of part of what we're learning about too, is how quickly it's drying. It'll tell you a lot about your environment, about your paper, about your paints, and allow you to get to know your materials better. So I'm just going to make this dry now and then do another layer. Okay, tuck in a few more pumpkins here.
And apparently my camera decided to cut out here, so I am painting around those final pumpkin shapes with a very dark, almost black color here. I mixed burnt umber, and I think it's called Van Dyke brown, and Payne's gray. So it's just super dark, very little water to get this final layer. And I made sure that I didn't do too many open spaces left here. So I tucked in pumpkins kind of everywhere that there were holes or big holes. And I'm using this darkest color just to create some high contrast.
All right, now, if you want to add just the smallest amount of detail on some of these pumpkins, you can just take a super light wash. So I'm coming back to like somewhere in between these two colors. And I'm just gonna add in some lines basically. And they don't have to be solid or anything, but I'm following where these bumps are. Okay, so the bump on the bottom, and then I'm just creating almost like an oval here. And it's not solid, it's broken and it's jagged and it's not smooth because pumpkins are bumpy. And I'm just making a little bit of separation between the sections of the pumpkin. Now, you don't have to do that. You can leave it as it was, but I just wanted to try it and see how it would work. And I kind of like the effect. So on this lightest pumpkin, I'm using an even lighter wash. So I just added a little bit more water into that same mix. And I'm just adding in those lines, and each one's a little bit different. I don't want them all to be exactly the same, even though I use that same like stencil on all of them. It doesn't matter. They can all have slightly different lumps and bumps. And then just kind of defining the edge of the stem on some of them as well. Okay. And then I'm just going to keep kind of adding those details to each one. And obviously, as our pumpkins get darker, we need just a slightly darker wash. And so I'm just adding the tiniest bit of red. I have kind of my colors mixed up here already, so I'm just going for the lighter areas for the lighter pumpkins and the more red areas for some of these darker pumpkins. All right, and that's where I'm gonna call it done. So just a fun exercise that gets a cool kind of graphic result at the end with high contrast.
All right, and again, here is that finished painting. I really enjoyed doing this one. I hope you give it a try as well. Let me know in the comments if you try it and what you think. Thank you so much for watching. Have an awesome day.